All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Pam Goldstein from the Westchester Jewish Council. We are so honored to have you joining us. I was going to say this morning, but really early afternoon. We are so honored and thrilled to have our incredible friends and partners from AJC Westchester Fairfield joining us and to have Myra Clark-Siegel presenting on this important briefing. So I'm going to throw it right to Myra. We're going to be taking questions. Please put them in the chat and we will get to as many as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, everybody at Westchester Jewish Council for the ongoing incredible partnership that we have together. We wanted to really have this conversation today for clergy, executive directors, and presidents of synagogues and partner organizations within Westchester Jewish Council to really talk about the state of anti-Semitism in the United States today. And I want to first introduce Wendy Lubkin, our regional president, Lisa Roberts, who wears so many hats in our community, but is chairing AJC's synagogue outreach program as well. And I really feel that I could just sit back and mute myself because Steve and Nita Lowy could do this entire presentation themselves. And thank you for your decades of leadership for our community. We are just so honored to be together with you as always. And also Jill Friedman, our Associate Regional Director, and our colleagues at AJC. But I want to thank all of you. I know this is an incredibly busy time pre-Pesach. And so again, thank you to Westchester Jewish Council and to everybody for joining us. I want to jump in and I'm going to share screen with you all and give you a little bit of a briefing, and then we'll be able to open it up for Q&A afterwards. The reason that we wanted to have this conversation today for you all is there is an opportunity for us to not only be educated ourselves about the state of anti-Semitism in the United States today, which we all know and feel on a daily and frankly, momentarily, minute by minute basis that we are experiencing, that our families, our communities are experiencing, but also what do we do about it? What can we do to address this, not only reactively, but proactively? And that is really part of what we're going to be talking about today as well. So I'm going to share screen and jump into this. Please bear with me for 1 second. Hopefully you'll be able to see my screen here. Of course, my computer is being very slow. Okay. So I want to start off asking you this question because we at AJC have now been doing a survey of the Jewish community and general society writ large for 5 years now. So after the Tree of Life horrific attack in Pittsburgh 5 years ago on October 27th, 2018, we, like you, were hearing from our community members with deep concerns. And so what we wanted to understand at AJC is whether what we were hearing was a reaction to this horrific situation or something far deeper that was going on. So we undertook the largest survey of its kind of the lived experiences of the Jewish community across the United States. And that is the State of Anti-Semitism report. We have now been doing this for 5 years. So we have not only a baseline, but trends over the past 5 years. After the first year, we also began doing surveys of general society writ large. So we have 4 years of these parallel surveys, both of the lived experiences of the Jewish community and general society overall. So when we do briefings, and I want to invite you again to partner with us on all of this for the private sector, for K through 12 faculty and administrators, for university presidents, for interfaith intergroup partners, for governmental leaders, for diplomats, we do this presentation. This is the first question that we ask them. And the interesting thing is we see a number of hands go up because we ask, have you changed your behavior out of fear of expressing your religion? We see a number of hands go up, but not unanimity. What's interesting is we have heard some people say, you know what? I grew up Protestant in a very Catholic community. I was afraid to share my religion publicly. Or other people have said, because of, my religion X, I've been afraid. As a Muslim, I've been afraid in certain communities. This is one of the key questions. The Jewish community, of course, and we'll get into some of the data findings, experiences this in a very significant way. We then ask the next question, which is, over the past year, if you have seen any anti-Semitic incidents, such as negative remarks, this could be in person, it could be online, it could be graffiti, it could be something that happened at a synagogue or at a JCC or at a day school. Literally, when we do these, even where there are communities that are not Jewish, who are those stakeholder audiences that we're briefing, every single hand goes up. So that in many ways defines the state of anti-Semitism in the United States today. And I want to take one moment and talk about AJC, because AJC, the American Jewish Committee, is the oldest Jewish civil rights organization in the country. We have 25 regional offices across the United States. Of course, we here in Westchester, Fairfield, but we also have institutes and offices around the world. So for many years, we were focused on anti-Semitism in Europe. And what our European colleagues were saying to us was, just wait, it is going to come to the United States. So in fact, that is what has happened over the past number of years. We are fiercely nonpartisan at AJC, so the information I'm sharing with you is also nonpartisan. Part of what we do when we are briefing leaders who are outside the Jewish community is to make sure they have an understanding of the diversity of the Jewish community, because this is an area that so many people don't actually know about, particularly here in the United States, the richness and the diversity of our community. So when we share this image, which is a compendium of different people, and we ask them, who do you think in this montage is Jewish? Everybody's hand goes up, with the young woman in the center and the bottom left, because she's wearing a t-shirt that says, this is what Jewish looks like. But not everybody knows that every image here represents the diversity of our Jewish community. And that is really important, because as we're looking at so many frameworks about which people are looking at DEI, et cetera, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, they don't necessarily think of the Jewish community as a minority community and needing to have a seat at the table. So this is part of what we talk about. These are a few headlines from the past few years. Intentionally, these are not post-October 7th headlines. These are from a few years ago, because again, the rise of anti-Semitism here in the United States, first of all, has occurred no matter whether there is a Democrat or a Republican in the White House, but it has occurred over time and it is increasing. And if we look at some of these headlines, we know when we talk about the FBI, and you see in the bottom left, the synagogue in Texas, we all remember viscerally the Colleyville attack. But what most people don't know about is it took the FBI director in charge on site 3 days to label that a hate crime, an anti-Semitic hate crime, despite the fact that the gunman held Jews hostage in a synagogue and demanded the release of a convicted terrorist. And the reason he did this was he said, quote, President Biden listens to the Jews. And yet we have so much education that we have to do, because this was an anti-Semitic hate crime. One of the things that is so important is to define what anti-Semitism is. And I also think we need to use very clear language. Anti-Semitism is a complicated term. It was used by an anti-Semite himself. And we at AJC, and many of us, use anti-Semitism not with a hyphen, but one word. It is anti-Semitism. But let's speak very clearly. Anti-Semitism is Jew hatred. We need to be clear. We need to use these kinds of words, because that is what people understand. When you use the term anti-Semitism, so often people don't really know what that means, and that it is really about hatred of Jews. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IRA for short, is an NGO, and AJC was part of this and is part of this, that work to define anti-Semitism in the best way possible. How do you define hate? That's an almost impossible task, but it's important that we know what the definition of anti-Semitism or Jew hatred is. It is a certain perception of Jews, and I want to underscore the word perception because that matters, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. So it is perception and it is expression and action. The IRA working definition is exactly that. It is a tool. It is a working definition. It is not legally binding, but it is an important tool and resource for our government officials, for our schools, for our companies, our corporations, for our stakeholders to adopt as a resource and a tool to say that there is no room for hate in our communities. We have worked with governmental officials at the municipal level, at the state level, at the federal level, with diplomats, with countries around the world to adopt the working definition. I will say that both the governors of New York and Connecticut have adopted the working definition of anti-Semitism as a tool and a resource. And Westchester County Executive George Latimer adopted this 2 years ago by proclamation for all of Westchester County, so that it's an important tool that everybody has. One of the things that's really important to understand about anti-Semitism or Jew hatred is unique among any other kind of hatred against any other community. And we stand in solidarity with all minority communities. There is no room for hate against any community. But what is really important to understand is that hatred against the Jewish community is unique in that it's punch down and push up. So that's what you see on the chart here. You have consistently, when you have hatred against other communities, it is pushing them down. When you are talking about hatred of the Jewish community, it is pushing Jews down. You see through the ages, vermin and blaming Jews for the plague and all kinds of other things. But there is also a hatred of Jews for being successful. So that's where you hear the tropes about Jews controlling Hollywood or Jews controlling the media or Jews controlling the economy. So there is hatred saying you're not good enough, but also hatred, you're too good. And that is a particular unique challenge against the Jewish community. One other thing that I want to mention is that the Southern Poverty Law Center tracks hate groups across the country that you see in the map here. About 1,200 hate groups, actually 1,225 hate groups. These are groups that hate women, that hate Blacks, that hate LGBTQI+, that hate Latinos, that hate Asian American Pacific Islanders. There is one through line, one among all of these communities. And that is, in addition to the minority communities that they hate, there is hatred against the Jewish community as well. So we have to be clear-eyed. And as I mentioned, AJC is fiercely nonpartisan, but it also means that when we are dealing with hatred against the Jewish community, it is not any one political party. It is on the left, it is on the right, and it is within religious extremism as well. So there are basically 4 ways that contemporary anti-Semitism can manifest. One is, as we mentioned, hatred against Jews. One is stereotypes and scapegoating, Holocaust denial and distortions, and inappropriately invoking Israel. And I'll touch upon that for a moment, because that tends to be the elephant in the room, particularly in conversations over the past few years. You can criticize the government, the policies, the whatever you want in terms of the state of Israel as a democracy, just as you can any other country. 193 member nations of the United Nations, of which Israel is proudly a member nation. You can criticize those policies of Israel anytime you want. And as we like to say, with 10 million citizens in Israel, 10 million Israelis criticize the policies of the government, no matter where they are. And every Israeli thinks that they're a better prime minister than whichever prime minister may be in power at the time. Natan Sharansky, however, came up with what he calls the 3D test of when anti-Zionism can verge on anti-Semitism: demonization, delegitimization, and double standards. And I think it's important to touch upon these. So again, you can criticize the policies, but demonization, if you are only singling out Israel, among the 193 member countries, if you are not standing up against what is happening to the Uyghurs, if you are not standing up to what is happening when students are kidnapped in Nigeria, if you are not standing up to what Syria has done to its own people, then you have a problem. So demonization, delegitimization, saying that Israel has no right to exist is problematic. And double standards, holding Israel to a place where you are not holding other countries to a place of responsibility. That is when, again, we run into some issues. So I want to touch upon what I mentioned at the beginning and the questions that I asked at the beginning, which is some of the lived experiences. And this is really where AJC really asks questions about the lived experiences. And I want to show you some of the trend lines here. So no surprise to anybody, as you see here. Let me say one other thing. This year, we went into the field October 5th to do this survey. Obviously, nobody anticipated the horrific Hamas terror attacks that took place on October 7th. We immediately pulled our survey because there was no way that we could ask these kinds of questions. A few weeks later, we did go back into the field, and we were in the field until November 21st. With the data that I'm showing you, and by the way, you are among the first to hear this because we released this report on February 13th of this year. If we were to have been in the field in December, January, even February, I would wager that the numbers that I'm sharing with you would be even higher in terms of the lived experience of hatred against the Jewish community. But this is based on what we have from, again, the largest survey of its kind of the Jewish community across the United States. So again, we see trend lines here, and we see that anti-Semitism is a problem according to Jews. Again, that is of adults. We ask adults. We don't ask teenagers or anybody under the age of 18. And one of the things, as I mentioned, is that we look at trend lines. It's vitally important that as we are meeting with government officials, with diplomats, with interfaith, intergroup partners, that we have this data, because that is important. With law enforcement, we work with FBI, we work with police chiefs. Many of you work with law enforcement as well. And it's important for them to have this data so that they can understand what our community is experiencing. We know that we are reaching out to our law enforcement for greater enhanced security, not because we want to, but because this is the reality that our communities are facing now. So you see here that there has been an increase where now nearly 9 of 10 American Jews say that anti-Semitism has increased over the past 5 years. And again, if you look at this, again, compared to a year ago, and remember we asked this in November, Jews feel less secure now in the United States than they did a year ago. And I want to stay on this slide for a moment because I think it's really important that we unpack what this really means. 63% of American Jews, 6 in 10 this year, more than 6 in 10, said that they feel less safe, less secure in the United States now than they did a year ago. But the reason that I want to really underscore this is that's a 22% jump from the responses just a year ago. And that was already 10% over the year prior. So what we're really looking at is a huge jump in terms of American Jews saying, I do not feel safe in the United States at this point in time as a Jew. And if you think back to what some of the questions were that I raised at the beginning that we ask, people have changed their behavior. So when we ask whether people change their behavior, and by the way, the entire survey and findings are at ajc.org, more information than you can ever begin to dive into. So I'm just sharing some highlights with you, but you have all of the information there on ajc.org. You will see that 1 out of every 4 American Jews has reported experiencing anti-Semitism themselves personally. And again, remember, we're not asking this of high school students, and we're not asking this of college students. And knowing what is happening in our communities and on our college campuses today, those numbers would be even higher. So this could be online, it can be in person, combinations of different experiences. Again, Jews have changed their behavior. This is no surprise to any of you, but it is a huge surprise when we share this with non-Jewish partners and stakeholders. The fact that nearly 1 out of every 2 Jews tucks in their Star of David, or is afraid to wear a kippah in public, or may cover their kippah with a baseball hat, or may think twice about going to synagogue, may think twice about sending their child or themselves to an event out of fear for their safety in 2024 is problematic. And that is why this data is so important, so that we can be, again, sharing this with opinion leaders and decision makers so that they can do something about it. And I want to talk about one thing, and we're going to talk about what we can do, not just the oi of this, but actually what we can be doing to be empowered. But the reason that I think that this is so important is, again, there is no reason, and it is unconscionable to think that the Jewish community needs to be responsible for dealing with hatred against ourselves. We would never expect members of any other minority community to be responsible for solely dealing with the hatred against their community. This is an all of society problem. And when we know that when there are attacks or hatred towards the Jewish community, we are typically the first, we are the canary in the coal mine. And then there is hatred that also happens against other members of other minority communities. And that's why we have to make sure that we stand together really as a whole of society. We did ask a question, several questions after October 7th about the lived experience. Again, had we asked this in December and January, this would have been an even higher number. But 8 in 10 American Jews, no surprise to any of us, felt less safe and continue to feel less safe after October 7th. One thing I want to flag for all of you, particularly as leaders in our community here, is a potential perfect storm that we are going to be facing in the fall. We see increases in anti-Jewish hatred when there are elections, when there are Jewish holidays, and when there is violence in the Middle East. And the fall shows us elections. We have the Chagim. Please God, we're going to have quiet in Israel and in the Middle East, but there could be a perfect storm. And I think it's important that we be very clear-eyed about thinking about the future together. One of the things that I also want to share is that it's not just AJC that is identifying the hatred against the Jewish community. The FBI is responsible every year with putting together information that law enforcement funnels up to the FBI. There is a program that law enforcement is asked to voluntarily report every incident of hate crimes within their communities through a system called NIBORs to the FBI. The FBI aggregates it and shares this information. Typically, they share their findings in the fall of every year. The #1 target community of all racially based hate crimes is the Black community. That is typically 60% of all racially based hate crimes. The #1 target community historically of all religiously based hate crimes is the Jewish community, anywhere from 55 to 60% of all religiously based hate crimes. I want you to think about something within this. The Jewish community, as we all know, is tiny, roughly 2.4% of the American population. So if you think about the fact that all religiously based hate crimes, 55% is against the Jewish community, and our numbers are so tiny. And we know from the FBI that hate crimes are woefully underreported. This is another example of the hatred towards our community. So what can we do? I like to go from oi to joy. because it's not enough to Schweigewalt. It's not enough to say, we have a problem. We are a community and you all are leaders in fomenting change and making sure that people know what the challenges are, but more importantly, what everyone has agency to do to make change, to stand up to hatred, and to make our communities and our societies stronger together. So one of the questions that I mentioned, we ask of general society writ large. And this is where I think if there's any good news in our State of Anti-Semitism report, this is where there's some good news, because civil society, general society says that anti-Semitism is something for all of society to address. And this number has been increasing. And I think that this is really important to share also, because a few years ago, when we asked this survey, what we found, particularly with younger respondents, but not only, was that almost 50% of people that we asked did not know the term anti-Semitism. I'm going to let you sit with that for a moment. That in the United States, nearly 1 out of every 2 people did not know the term anti-Semitism, or they may have heard of it, but they didn't really know what it meant. And that's why I think we have to use clear language and talk about hatred against Jews. But what we see here is the work of all of our community unified together to raise awareness, to educate people, and to give them tools and resources to understand what anti-Semitism is. Because we see here such overwhelming responses by general society saying that anti-Semitism is a problem and that it is a society as a whole responsibility to address it. So Eric Ward from the Southern Poverty Law Center really speaks to this issue himself, where he talks about how hatred towards the Jewish community is symptomatic of an illness within society overall and democracy overall. This is allyship and this is partnership, and we all have to stand together as a community of conscience. One of the other things that I want to note is I mentioned that AJC has institutes and offices around the world. And as such, we have worked with the anti-Semitism envoys that many countries have. And what we did in the spring was bring 7 of those global anti-Semitism envoys to the White House for a meeting on anti-Semitism. It ended up being the longest meeting in White House history. And what took place as a result, and many of our organizations put forth recommendations to the White House developed and launched in May a national plan to combat anti-Semitism, which was a whole of government approach with over 40 federal agencies involved. And I really congratulate, and we at AJC really champion the fact that the White House did this. And a few months later, by the way, they did the same with an anti-Islamophobia approach, which is absolutely critical as well. Of the 200 recommendations to the White House, over 100 of them came from and were adopted by the recommendations that AJC made. And this, again, is because of our experiences globally, nationally, and locally here. And so part of what we did is, because the White House came out with this all-of-government approach, AJC launched a task force to ensure that we're working with government to ensure that they are standing by. It's a 1-year program that the White House launched to make sure that the White House and the federal agencies are, in fact, abiding by the different recommendations that each of these federal agencies proactively put forward. I'm on the National Task Force from a professional perspective, and one of our lay leaders is on it from a lay leader perspective. And we are working with all our agencies and welcome the opportunity, as always, to partner with all of you on this. So what can we do? I talked about how we do not ask younger people their experiences because they're minors, but we have to empower our students. So one of the things that we offer is Leaders for Tomorrow, or LIFT, at AJC, which is a program for high school students. We teach them to be proactive, empowered, proud Jewish high school students and prepare them not only for what they might encounter on college campuses, but what they are encountering today They are not leaders for tomorrow. I think we need to rebrand it as leaders for today. They are the ones who are dealing with social media. They are the ones who are dealing with what's happening in their schools, when there is a swastika in their school, when a teacher is inappropriately saying things about Israel or about the Jewish community, when fellow students are saying things, and certainly as they're considering which universities they may apply to or may attend, and how do they deal with these kinds of things. You see here a picture, we take them to Washington every year where they take their skills and they go meet with their elected officials in Congress and talk to them about their lived experiences and how important it is for us to all stand up together against hatred. This was just in February when we had the largest delegation, by the way, from Westchester Fairfield out of all the 180 students from across the country. We are opening our cohort for the fall already. Jill Friedman, who's on the screen with us today, you can reach out to her, and we're happy to share information afterwards. But this is about meeting the moment we are in now because our students need to be prepared. Translate Hate is something that we developed at AJC. And again, at ajc.org, we've taken the tropes, the anti-Semitic tropes that so often are used, sometimes innocently, and sometimes with malicious intent by people, and we define them. So here is one example, conspiracy theory. This is one that we've seen over and again. What we do in Translate Hate, which is publicly available and on the ajc.org website, it is used as a tool so that people can be aware of what these tropes are and how they can be used so that people understand how they land on the Jewish community when they're used and why they're inappropriate. And here's one example. This is a rock at the University of Knoxville in Tennessee. Now, if you think about your college campus, you remember that venues like this are usually painted in school colors for sporting events or graduations or celebratory events. But one day, a couple years ago, students woke up on campus to see this. And I'll just read it to you for those of you who can't read it clearly on the screen. Jews did 9/11, Google dancing Israelis. So this conspiracy theory trope, or if you think about Charlottesville a few years ago when people were chanting, Jews will not replace us, which is part of the replacement theory, these tropes are defined and Translate Hate so that, again, people understand them. What we did at AJC also is after October 7th, we updated Translate Hate to include many of the hate-filled tropes that are chanted and that we all have experienced on social media, on campuses, and in our communities, so that people understand why these are hate-filled and how they land on the Jewish community. Globalize the Intifada, from the river to the sea, resistance by any means. These are just a few examples. These are here, and these are ways for, again, our decision makers to be able to understand what these are, how they're used, and what this means to the Jewish community. Very importantly, AJC developed resource guides for key constituencies, and I put the link up here, and we can send out for all of you links to all of this. But we created resource guides for university presidents, for students, for heads of independent schools, for heads of public schools, for social media influencers, for the media, for municipal government leaders, for members of Congress, for law enforcement. This provides concrete tools and resources for all of these key stakeholder audiences to be able to, A, be aware of the situation, and B, be empowered. Because often what these stakeholders do is come to us and they say, we don't know what to do. We want to be upstanders. We want to stand up for the community. We don't know what to do. And we don't expect anybody to know necessarily what to do, but these are resources in a very easy, digestible way with very concrete actions that they can take. One of those is adopting the IRA, or International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, working definition of anti-Semitism that I mentioned. It is really important that we work to ensure that people do that, because again, it means there's no room for hate, and it ensures that people are aware of how hate against the Jewish community can be manifest. Going from oi to joy. I also want to mention that we are about to be in May, which I can't believe, but we have a moment here. May is, we have Heritage Month for many, many communities. February, as we all know, is Black History Month. March, we just celebrated Women's History Month. And May is both Jewish American Heritage Month, or we love acronyms, right? So JAM, as we like to say, and it's Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We have an opportunity together to go to our schools, to our workplaces, to our government officials, and encourage them to celebrate publicly Jewish American Heritage Month. It's an easy way for these key stakeholders to stand up together with the Jewish community and also with the Asian American Pacific Islander community to stand together. AJC today is launching our new website for Jewish American Heritage Month. We have turnkey template materials that we are happy to provide for you, social media things that people can just post. We encourage all of you, every synagogue, to adopt the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism. We encourage every synagogue, every organization to celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month. We will send you this information so that, again, you have these materials at your fingertips and you don't have to create it yourselves. We can create a thunderclap of joy, of pride in our community, and we can model this for our synagogue members, for our organizational members, for our parents, for our teens, for our kids. This is a moment for us to take our pride and be public about being Jewish and proud. There is no moment, I would wager, that is more important than right now. 6 months after Hamas's horrific terror attacks, when we still have 133 individuals who are being held hostage in Gaza, let us show the world that we are Jewish and proud. So I'm going to stop there. I'm also going to invite you to join us at Global Forum, AJC's conference in June. We have a special rabbinic rate, clergy rate, and happy to share that with you as well. And I'm going to stop here, take any questions. We can also talk about DEI and how to deal with DEI. I'm going to stop sharing and see if you all have any questions. And I just want to, again, thank all of you. And again, Lisa Roberts is here. We would welcome the opportunity to partner with you, to brief your synagogues, to brief your organizational membership on this. Information is power. And that is a moment that we all have to work on together. So I will stop here and take questions. If you can put your questions in the chat. And I apologize, I talked for so long, but so much to share with you all. And also, if you want to unmute and just ask your question, happy to do it that way. And I'll also just take a moment to say, Nita, you were the leader of all of this when you were in Congress. So thank you for leading the way for so many people.
I just wanted to thank you very much for putting this together today. And my name is Evan Janish. I'm the new chair of the Israel Committee for Temple Israel of Northern Westchester. We will be in touch with you. I think it would be a very compelling and helpful presentation to have someone like you present in this manner for our congregation. So I will speak with others on our committee, as well as with our senior and junior rabbi, and I promise to be in touch shortly.
That's great. Thank you. And congratulations, Evan, on this new role. And
Thank
Lisa Roberts, who is here, also is happy to be working with all of the synagogues to bring this forward. Lisa is our synagogue outreach chair at AJC. And obviously, very involved in Westchester Jewish Council as well. So a very large, strong family together here. So thank you, Evan. We will be sharing this recording. That is also why we recorded it, because we know that this is a very busy time. So we'll be sharing this recording with everybody so that anybody who wasn't able to join us or who wants to kind of look at some of this again. And we'll also be sharing these resources, these resource guides, and the LIFT application for high school students, and the Global Forum as well. And there's also 1 day availability if you want to take the train down to Global Forum and just be there for 1 day. I would say be there for Monday. I know that Tuesday is Erev Shavuot, but Tuesday is the day that we're on Capitol Hill. And if you don't have to race back for Shavuot, I would say it is vitally important. Again, I think perhaps now more than ever, and I don't use that term lightly, for our community to be represented on Capitol Hill, meeting with all of our members of Congress and showing how important these issues are to our whole community. So I would invite all of you to join us for that. Wendy.
So speaking about Congress, I'm getting off and joining a meeting with a House member, and just wanted to share that as a result of the national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, that a new act was introduced yesterday called Countering Anti-Semitism Act. AJC had a role in that, and there's a statement on our website. So all the work, all the advocacy, hopefully, with all our lay leaders and professional team, will have an impact so that we can stem this horrific rise in anti-Semitism across our country.
Indeed.
Myra, I just want to say one thing. In addition to everything that you've done and said in the presentation, which is a very thorough, complete, and universal presentation, I'd like to focus on a small piece, which is Hillel. I believe that on college campuses, Hillel is the place of first resort for Jewish students. And to the extent that AJC can support rabbis and lay leaders in Hillel around college campuses, I think that is vital, because all of us here, as I look at the screen, looks to me like we're over 25, all of us here. But the people that count are our children and our grandchildren, mostly our grandchildren here. And they, on college campuses, I think, need the inspiration, the protection, the education that Hillel can give them. So I would encourage you and all of AJC to partner with Hillel and to give them the kind of resources that are necessary to assist in having our youngsters navigate this terrible time.
Steve, there's a reason you're a national leader also. And that is absolutely true. And I'm so proud to share that just last week, AJC and Hillel announced an even stronger formal partnership. So exactly to your point, Hillel and Chabad are very involved on college campuses. And we believe very strongly that they are, if you will, the boots on the ground. They are on these campuses with the students, with the administrators, with the faculty, day in and day out. And we are working very strongly to support them. So we at AJC literally signed a formal agreement with Hillel, even deepening and expanding our partnership with Hillel to ensure that our students are supported there. Jill, thank you so much for putting the press statement here in the chat. And we work very closely also, as I think everybody on this screen does, with Rachel Klein from Hillels of Westchester. They are dealing with some pretty terrible situations going on some campuses here in our very own backyard in Westchester. Rachel and I just spoke on a panel together the other day at Bethel, where she and a student outlined what they have been going through on some campuses. It may not have the national headlines that some of the other campuses have, but it should. It is horrific what they are going through. And I absolutely agree, Steve. Part of what we need to be doing is working together to ensure that our Hillels and our Chabads and our resources on campus are strengthened and have our support. And sometimes that even means reaching out to Hillel directors and saying, hey, send some students over to us for Shabbat dinner for some R&R, because they are really on the front lines there. And that's also why I want to go back to the LIFT program. We cannot wait until students go to college to expect them to know what to do. It means in our K through 12, it means in our religious schools, it means in our Hebrew high schools. We have got to be educating and empowering our students, and it means their parents as well. On Sunday, we just had our third major program for parents and teens to empower them to address these issues, where we dealt with real life scenarios and workshops. We are going to be doing more of these. We had 400 in November when we did the first one for parents. We had 100 in Stamford. We just had 200 parents and teens on Sunday in Greenwich, and we want to do more. So we would love to do more of this and plan these for back to school and make sure that our parents and teens are empowered. And make sure your teens in your synagogues and in your organizations really register for LIFT, because they will be prepared. Bob, I think you have your hand raised, but you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'd like to add to what Steve said, because it's something that I passionately agree with. The future is through these kids. Without them, we're not going to have the leaders of the Jewish community, and we're not going to have the money for the Jewish community for AJC, ADL, or any of those organizations. So this group that I'm kind of involved with is talking about ways of providing the Hillels of the world, or other Jewish organizations, with the ammunition, meaning the information and the learning, for the kids to understand what is a lie and what is real, and how they can respond to the rhetoric coming out of the non-Jewish world. In that regard, also, we've aligned ourselves with an organization called Honest Reporting. It's similar to Cameron, and what they do is to monitor newspapers for anti-Semitic or anti-Israel articles that are clearly wrong, and contact the writer and the editor of those newspapers to correct it. Because part of, I think, what we're experiencing is, if you listen to the news, most of it is anti-Israel in what's going on. And as the presidents of Harvard, MIT, and Penn quoted, they said you have to understand the context. And the media is not putting anything into context, and is only showing the destruction that's occurring in Gaza.
So we all have a lot of work to do, as you said, Bob. I want to share with you all also, and the reason that I think it's important for us to empower and educate our students and our parents is the parents need to model for their kids, and the parents don't always have the knowledge. And that's why we are working to ensure that in our programs that we're doing, it's for parents and for teens. We bring them together, and then we take them into separate breakout groups, because we know the kids are not going to speak up in front of their parents, and the parents are going to be afraid to say, I don't know how to answer this in front of their kids. So that is why we aim at both, so that people have information. I'm going to share screen with you for one more moment. Every single day, AJC updates talking points on what is going on right now. So if you go to ajc.org/Israel-Hamas war, I wish we didn't have to have something called that, but we do. It's a site within our website. It is everything you need to know. And so there are talking points, there are action steps, and I'm just sharing this with you because you'll see all of the information here that you know, including common questions and myths and how to address these things. So there is information there. There are the resources there. And again, we have these resources guides, and we will share this with you. And again, I cannot underscore enough how we have a moment now. We are April 11th. We have an opportunity to make sure that we are loud and proud in terms of Jewish American Heritage Month. And let's do this in the companies that we work in. Let's do this in the schools that our kids are at, the universities. Let's do this within our organizations and our synagogues. Every single synagogue in this community should put on its website information about Jewish American Heritage Month and have social media blasts about it. Let's empower our parents. Let's encourage them to reshare this on their social media. We are at a moment where our community feels threatened. We know this. We all are experiencing this. Let's give them something to be proud about and that each person can do to stand up for themselves and say, Hineni. That is one of the best things that we can do. And we really look forward to continuing that partnership together with all of you. I'm going to see if there are any other questions. Otherwise, I'm going to give you 8 minutes back into your day.
Right. If there are no other questions, I just really wanted to thank you all for being here. I wanted to thank Myra and Jill, Wendy, Lisa, Adam, Beth. You guys are just such incredible partners and friends, and the council could not do the work we do in the community without AJC. So we are so grateful to be able to bring this opportunity to all of you. So thank you for giving your time today. As Myra mentioned, we will be sharing a recording, and there'll be many resources that Myra discussed as well that we will be sharing out, and we hope you will bring to your synagogues and organizations. And thank you for all you do each day. Our community is very lucky to have all of you as leaders.
We
And
are
we're lucky to have you as well, Pam. Thank you for the partnership.
absolutely always happy to partner and grateful for your leadership for all of you. Our community is strong and we are working together to strengthen it even more. So thank you all and wishing you a happy early Pesach, and let all of our hostages be home in time for Pesach. Be well.
Bye.
Bye.